Congratulations, lucky winners. The other thing I should say is that we have more of these readings coming up. We are doing the alumni readings once a month, and we also have Claire Massoud coming up in November. And I can't at this moment remember what else, but I think we're going to keep these readings going through the next several months. And shoot, there was another housekeeping thing, but I lost it. Oh, I know what it was. Adam will put in the chat links to purchase everyone's books. If so, when you find yourself moved by a poem, go ahead and click on that link. Okay, we're going to start tonight with Eduardo Corral. Eduardo C. Corral is the son of Mexican immigrants. Grey Wolf Press published his second book, Guillotine, in 2020. His first book, Slow Lightning, won the Yale Series of Younger Poets competition. His poems have appeared in Ambit, New England Review, The New Republic, Plowshares, and Poetry. He's the recipient of a Whiting Writers Award, a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, the Hodder Fellowship, and the National Holmes Poetry Prize, both from Princeton University. He teaches in the MFA program in creative writing at North Carolina State University. Welcome, Eduardo.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and it's a pleasure to be welcomed into the Swanee family space, so thank you for that. I'm going to begin with the first poem from the second book, titled Ceremonial. One of the goals I had for the second book is for it to risk more, to have lyric speakers be more vulnerable, and this is the first poem I wrote with that in mind. Ceremonial. Delirious, touch-starved, I pinch a mole on my skin, pull it off like a bead. I pinch and pull until I'm holding a black rosary. Prayer will not cool my fever. Prayer will not melt my belly fat, will not thin my thighs. A copper-faced man once called me beautiful. Stupid, stupid man. I am obese. I am worthless. I can still feel his thumb, warm, burrowed, moving in my mouth. His thumbnail, a flake of sugar he will not allow me to swallow. Desperate for the sting of snow on my skin, rosary tight in my fist. I walk into a closet, crawl into a wedding dress. Oh Lord, here I am. One of the main concerns of the lyric speaker and the I-centric poems is what happens to you as a person, what happens to your heart, your soul, your body, when you desire, love somebody, yearn for somebody who cannot return that affection, that desire, that lust. How do you navigate all that surplus? This poem talks about that. It also brings in coming of age at the height of the AIDS epidemic, body weight issues. Autobiography of my hungers. His beard, an avalanche of honey, an avalanche of thorns. In a bar too close to the Pacific, he said, I don't love you, but not because I couldn't be attracted to you. Liar, even my soul is pot-bellied. Thinness in my mind equals the gay men on the nightly news, kissed by death and public scorn. The anchorman declaring weight loss is one of the first symptoms. The Portuguese have a word for imaginary, never to be experienced love, whoop-de-doo. I don't love you, he said. The words flung him back. In his eyes, I saw it, to another bar where a woman sidestepped his desire, another hunger, our friendship. In 10th grade, weeks after my first kiss, my mother said, you're looking thinner. That evening, I smuggled a cake into my room. I ate it with my hands, licked buttercream off my thumbs until I puked. Desire with no future, bitter longing. I starved myself by yearning for intimacy that doesn't and won't exist. Holding hands on a ferry, tracing with the tip of my tongue a jawline. In a bar too close to the Pacific, he said, I don't love you, but not because I couldn't be attracted to you. his beard, an avalanche of thorns, an avalanche of honey. This is the title poem, Guillotine, which is a word I was carrying in my skull for months and months and months. And usually when I do that, though, something sparks, something else is given to me, a word, another word, an image or a line. But for some reason, this word would not give me anything, no gifts. So I just sat down one day at a coffee shop and I wrote the word out by hand to have filled a page of my notebooks. And I looked at the page, I said, what do you see in your cursive, in that tangle of your cursive? And I saw scorpions. And that's what started this poem for me. Guillotine. The scorpions always arrive at dawn. Gently, the pincers touch the cuts on my lips. I clutch the edges of the mattress, stare at the mirrored ceiling. My mouth opens, but no sound staggers out. The scorpions, dark green, dank, reach in, pull out the razor blade under my tongue. Two scorpions, a razor blade, slowly, in unison, without letting go of the metal, they move. A little guillotine making its way down my body. I remember dragging my thumb through his beard, coppery and difficult. The scorpions pause, tilt the blade, a threat, a reminder. It's my task to stop yearning for as long as it takes them to carry a blade across my skin. My thoughts swerve from monsoon storms to accordions to pecan groves. The little guillotine starts moving again. I begin to sense the enormity of my body, the blade high in the air for now. I'm gonna finish with 3 poems. I reworked that 2-poem warning into a 3-poem warning. Questions for my body. Why are you nocturnal? How many cathedrals have you entered? Has cruelty ever saved you? Do you remember the length of his thumbs? Isn't that enough cake? Have you ever soaked your feet in gasoline? Do you still fear the virus? How can you sleep in this heat? Is that a soul patch? Did you laugh or cry at Keith's grave? Have you been claimed? This next poem borrows its title from an essay from Emerson, and the second part rephrases something said by St. Augustine. And the first part is kind of really associative. There's a lot of jumping around. And the second part has a stillness to it. And I want to kind of have those two kind of different kind of energies collide in the lyric space. Around every circle, another can be drawn. 1. In 10th grade, I kissed a guy who called me a faggot once or twice a week. I still see his voice. 6 hummingbirds nailed to a wall. In an olive grove outside of Fuente Grande in 1936, a teacher, 2 bullfighters, and Federico Garcia Lorca were shot to death by fascist soldiers. During the Reagan years, I sweated out new language. Capsi sarcoma, febrile, oral candasis. Last summer in Sevilla, I flirted with a stranger. He pinched my belly, walked away laughing. Later, along Calle Arjona, a remix of Girls Just Want to Have Fun poured out of a passing taxi cab. Shut the fuck up, Cyndi Lauper, I yelled. Mala copa, joder. The soldier who shot Lorca bragged he fired 2 bullets into his ass for being queer. For years, I desired a man who didn't desire me. He was gentle with my lust. I never thanked him. I'm thanking him now. But once, in a splinter-rich booth, he held my hand, a kindness I can't forgive. 2. Diminished but quick, I sprint into the desert toward a dust devil slowly twisting along a canal. I step into the grit and whirl, not dust after all, but a spiral of locusts, each a coil of gold oiled with honey. Long hind legs click, click, click. Not one skims my skin. A thunderhead on the horizon shimmers, half-built cathedral. What a saint said about God, I believe about loneliness. A circle whose center is everywhere and its circumference nowhere. I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. A kindness I can't forgive. I love that. What a great line. And I don't know if you all are noticing the chat, but you have at least one other compliment in the chat there, Eduardo. And please do use, since we can't give our readers the usual applause or laughter or gasps that they might normally get, please do use the chat when you hear something that you want to acknowledge. I think that's a nice way to do it. Okay. Our next reader is Laura Donnelly. Laura Donnelly is the author of the poetry collections Midwest Gothic, which won the Snyder Memorial Prize and was published by Ashland Poetry Press, and Watershed, the Cider Press Review Editors Prize. Originally from Michigan, she is an associate professor of English and creative writing at the State University of New York at Oswego. Thank you for being with us, Laura.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me all right? All right, great, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Adam, Gwen, Leah, and Sawani for hosting us here. And I'm still sitting with Eduardo's reading and the power of vulnerability in the lyric, and I know I'll be thinking back to that a lot. That was fantastic. I'm also so delighted to be reading with Charlotte and Cherene. As we were talking a bit before the reading started, we were in a Sawani workshop together in 2018. They were the two fellows in the workshop. I was with Mark Jarman and Greg Williamson. And I was immediately a fan of their work, and I'm just really grateful I got to know both their poems and them. So I had a set list like ready to go tonight because I tend to like over plan everything. And then I spent the afternoon outside in the garden planting bulbs. And I scrapped my plan and decided to read all garden poems. And there are a lot of them in my book, so that worked. And I was actually just chatting in the chat with Day about putting our gardens to bed. So that's what started this plan for tonight. I come from a family of women who gardened as an act of hope and art and persistence. And I think as I get to know the garden, I feel like I'm getting to know them and kind of another part or version of family history. So I'm going to start with a poem called 70 Bulbs. 70 bulbs. The tulip bulbs rest like lumps of garlic in my hand. The allium like pearl onions, ready to grace a martini. Daffodils grow stranger, bowing at the top like the necks of swans. Every hole marks a dark echo in the ground. Meanwhile, the swans circle a small circumference of pond to keep it from freezing. The bulbs imagine nothing, but know with uncanny precision when the earth will be hospitable. So the book explores a lot of gardens, real gardens, as well as gardens from literature, myth, religion. And I'm particularly interested in a lot of the gendered rhetoric around garden spaces and how it like alternately protects or constricts women, or maybe more often both. So one of the sections, a short section in the book, is a series of erasures from the book, The Secret Garden. And doing the erasures kind of let me play around with and make that text messy in ways I enjoyed. So So this is 5 short pieces. Each is an erasure from The Secret Garden. The Secret Garden erasures. It was after a bit, and the trees, as if through a long dark vault, the door massive, the faces in the portraits, and she, a very small, odd little. The leafless covered a wintry, and out of it tendrils made light sway. She remembered crocuses, snowdrops, daffodils, the damp earth, slowly old border beds, sharp green, as if they could breathe. This new kind of creature, rather late in remembering the grass and smothering, I shall come back speaking, push open the door, such red, such bright, such delighted. So many places seemed shut up. I thought I could dig somewhere. This next poem is called Primula vulgaris, which is simply the Latin name for the primrose. And primrose is one of the few plants I seem to grow very well. They keep multiplying, so I'm happy. But I also like the name Primula vulgaris. The actual translation of that is the first vulgar rose, which I kind of find kind of fantastic. And it makes me think about how much of gardening is not like just the pretty flowers. It's the muck and the compost and all of that. Primula vulgaris, primrose. Add compost, manure, the pulverized feathers of chickens condensed into bags with names like flower tone, holly tone, some that come right out, say blood meal. Grandmother does not want to leave her house for the nursing home. Mother does not want to leave her house for the divorce. Fist size and still green against November's frost. Each plant's roots are briefly exposed. Our favorites bloom fuchsia with yellow centers, wild as cat's eyes and bright as slits of flame. Blood and bone, I prepare earth, separate and transplant the primrose. In the dreams, I grind feathers and spade their powdery remains into still warm soil. I'm going to read one of my Garden of Eden poems from the book. This one's called Exodus. And I want to take a moment to give a shout out to Deborah Greger, who's a fantastic poet and also a visual artist. And the cover art here is a collage that she did. And the title of it is After Eden, Eve. And I hadn't seen it until after the book was ready, it was in production. I was looking for covers and I came upon this and it just felt right for a lot of reasons. And I'm really grateful we were able to use it. So this is called Exodus. Cleft rock, a woman and 2 children, boy and girl, exit the garden on foot. The girl's shoe falls off, now lopsided, now stung by thistle and lagging. Her mother turns back to call, hurry. No time to pack toothbrush or butterfly barrettes. Cleft rock, fissure channeling deep into stone. A woman with close cropped hair that will soon grow out to a knot at her nape. There was no snake, just my mother's voice, urgent, sure as the chime of a church bell echoing over the copper-tipped town. I'm going to read 2 more poems. This is called Garden Vernacular, and it starts with an epigraph from Ced Dolder's essay on vernacular gardens, where he says, vernacular gardens, by definition, are gardens of ordinary people. Garden vernacular. Ordinary as a glass of milk, a gun, a trio of stray cats that came to us from the fields. Shall I name all the flowers again? Yucca, daylily, peony, hens and chicks. I'm tired of listing them. Suffice it to say, I watered those daylilies 30 minutes each day, pulled 500 weeds and dropped them into a Maxwell House tin, scratched each task from my childhood chore list as if I could answer the world's demands. When we left, I followed the angel's decree, didn't turn back or clap, call or croon. For a long time, I thought history went to the winners and we were not them. But then our mother's new garden unfurled, winding and strange on a city block, the gloriosa daisies between cracks in concrete, the ferns lapping up the dusky shade like hush and wonder. They tended our secrets until our secrets no longer needed tending. It was not unusual to see bear cubs in that garden. It was not unusual to see that garden breathe. I'm going to read just one more. And I want to say thanks again so much to Sewanee, and thanks to everybody for coming out. When I'm guessing some of you have 100 other Zooms that you're in this week. So pretend those don't exist right now. Those they don't exist. But really awesome to get to be in this space with you. So this last poem is called Jardin sous la pluie, with apologies for my attempt at a French pronunciation. It means gardens in the rain, and it's the name of it's the title of a piece of music by Debussy, a piece of piano music. Gardens in the Rain. The storm gathers all to the phrase rustle of silks and skirts, animals tunneling through dense underbrush, rustle of curtain or sheet of paper, the concert program's insert that slips to the floor. Bend down, come up. On stage, the music is a pastel painting, left hand hopping over the right, as if an insect smelling rain. Then the brush against lavender and mint at dusk. Doudou la fondue, sleep, child, sleep. It invites the whole hand, the arms like live branches that grow and sway, great tumbles of cloudlight released from being, or a bell, glass on glass, the piano again a percussive instrument, each bright wet dot on rustling us from the sky. Thank you.
That was lovely, Laura. Thank you. I'm doing a lot of gardening myself in these times of being home all the time. So I really appreciate that theme. Next reader is Charlotte Pence. Charlotte Pence's first book of poems, Many Small Fires, received an IndieFab Book of the Year award from Forward Reviews. In July of 2020, her new collection, Code, was cited by the Millions as one of 4 July must-read poetry titles. She directs the Stokes Center for Creative Writing at the University of South Alabama. Welcome, Charlotte.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you to Sewanee. I tell you, I love that conference and everything that you all do to make it a very welcoming place. I am so excited to be here tonight. As mentioned, I was in the same class. It was Mark Jarman's class with Cherene and Laura. And so it's just really a wonderful way to celebrate a book coming into being. And Eduardo, love your poems. I taught your last book, and so it's great to see that there's a new one for me to fall in love with as well. So I'm going to actually read a poem from my last book first. The cover is green, so it disappears into the weeds, which is pretty much a metaphor for my life right now. But this poem is called Lemons Are Not Nipples. And it is talking a little bit about a lot about my father, who has been chronically homeless since I was about 18. He's a paranoid schizophrenic and treatment resistant. And this poem is hitting at sometimes how I, as a poet, will use a metaphor to distance myself from subjects that are uncomfortable for me. It's called Lemons Are Not Nipples. The tip of a lemon is not a nipple. The spine of a book is not the spine of a man. No thing is anything else. These are lies a poet tells to avoid certain truths. The closest I have come to holding a dying man's hand is witnessing a buffalo slaughtered. Blood glugged out in rhythm with his tapering heartbeat, but I couldn't tell when life switched off. An hour maybe before the animal stilled. I think of my father, a man never without a suitcase or place to leave. It will happen while he waits to cross the street, bag in hand. He doesn't notice the light changing, crowd bumping his shoulders, curb empties, yet he will remain driving someplace else. Partly why I wanted to read that poem tonight is there's that line in there that says, the closest I've come to holding a dying man's hand is witnessing a buffalo being slaughtered. And then after that book came out, 3 people close to me all died within, a period, just a very tight period. I mean, about, I think it was 2 years. And of course, we all have experienced grief and will experience grief. That is just the human condition. But one of the people close to me, she died when she left behind a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And she I was just so frustrated and mad because she had always wanted to be a mother, and she became a mother, and then her kids would die before ever getting to have any, they would not even have memories of who her mother is. So that set me off to the poems, which is what we do, right? When we don't know what else to do, we go to the poems. And this poem I'm getting ready to read is called After the Last Prognosis. This is a persona poem, and it's imagining being told you have a certain number of months left to live. It's in syllabics. This is from my new book, Code, which is about illness, grief, and resilience. After the last prognosis. I own these woods where children play their various games of murder. I can't relax into my grief. It's full of thinning deer, bulging ticks, children's screams outlining air. Always the stitch of some dark bird. Some of the best hiders believe they'll never be found. Watch the red sneaker without the leg. Smell leaves at their moment of disarray. Feel the sweat slip out of tense pores in this game of hide and seek. All my life, I've looked for light this slow. And inevitably, the chill thrill of the fingertips chasing, grazing, a hand swiping the back, and then is that glee or relief in the voice that declares, gotcha, ollie ollie, oxen, free, 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 ollie ollie, oxen free. One of the struggles that I had after it was my father-in-law, and then one of my, my close friend, and then also my friend's 16-year-old, after all these people died, I just found my words useless. Nothing I was saying was consoling anybody around me. And for a writer to now find words not helpful, it put me in something of a crisis. And I was just searching for what are the other ways that we keep people with us once they have passed. I'm not religious, and so for me, I didn't have the idea of heaven as a place to go. And so I was looking for non-verbal ways that people remain. And it took me on a few different hunts. I thought I would write some about fossils, but as it turns out, fossils are really pretty boring to write about. I thought that I would, um, I did find something with caves, going into some caves in northern Spain and seeing the art there. And so there are some poems about that. But what I tripped upon actually was DNA as something that gave me some solace, knowing that I would see these people that I loved in their family. And so weirdly as it is, DNA becomes a character in this book, and I give her some poems where she's speaking. And it turns out DNA is kind of sassy, or at least the DNA that I was channeling was a little sassy. And her, what she kept, what I realized is that her ideas of life is much more expansive than what my idea of life was, where mine might be a birth date to a death date. Hers is much more lineage. And so a lot of her poems are talking about how death doesn't necessarily exist. And this is one poem, Death talking to the young mother in the book. We cannot offer wisdom about Charon's leaky rowboat cajoling you, swaying between the worlds, but we can offer that the wooden floor on that boat is always wet, boards soft with salt and slosh, paint rubbed off by tapping boots. We can offer that wisdom carries with it blood, despite attempts to pretend that life doesn't require the taking of life, that chimps don't plot their victims' dismemberment. We cannot offer you old stories of the world beginning in a wink of white or on the back of the sea turtle. We do know, though, how everywhere you go, you are reminded of time, of what has come before, the albatross white as sin circling your head, and everywhere birds, from wharfs to sky rises, twill the air with song, and yet you still ask for more song. We can offer that this thing called heat is fire that seeks solitude, black stubble instead of field. We can offer that matter trying to tear us apart is neither dark nor invisible, and that the words come back are often the last you will hear. That's a poem from DNA's point of view. So I've been this book is now 6 months in the world, and I've been doing a lot of readings with it. And there are a couple of people who are very sweet and come to all my readings. So I feel the need to like do a different poem. And tonight I'm going to read this poem called Lightning, and this goes out to my friends Lydia and Nathan Poole, who just had a baby yesterday. And Nathan Poole is also part of the family here at Swanee. This poem, Lightning, is playing with the word, well, the poem's going to explain it, but how lightning is what they call right before the baby drops, and also lightning before the soul leaves the body. Lightning. You are dropping, my baby, twisting your way down. Lightning, they call this feeling of levity, certainty. Lightning, they call to the moment before death, another release. Such contrast, yet the word's origin offers no explanation for this linguistic hitchhike. No old root to mean light from nightfall or nightfall from light. With you inside me, I walk these brown woods, where old men walk along pines hardened into milk-white stones. What's to come? The flickering gait of a scared fox, fiddlehead fern unfolding. Twice the ground will call at either side of your years. Count them, the seconds between flash and crack, then divide by 5 to learn the distance between you, the storm, its rains. All right, one last poem for all of us, or for me. I think I have so many characters in this book, I think of them all talking. And this one is going to be from page 92 of Codes, called Grief. And as much as I realize this book is talking about grief, I also realize this book is talking about resilience. We just keep going. We find our ways, even if it's not the ways we had imagined, we still find them. And this is called Grief. When the sky is morning bright, 3 men will arrive in a pickup. Roofing hatchets, pry bars, and lawn rake will poke from the bed like steel flowers. Only the foreman will speak to you while the others hover at the curb. He'll tell you his plans, speaking slowly, simply, his voice deep as a hole in the ground. You offer, I hope it's not too hot for this work today, and he will answer, mind over matter. Or is it matter over mind? No matter. Never mind. The ladder will clink up, the roof shingles will smack down, the plywood you've never seen will swing off dark with water and softness. The house is laid bare to birds, the sun, the warming ozone, to anyone bored enough to study the celled attic. Once the work is done, you'll thank them and go back inside. From the street, others will not notice a change in the house, the roof gray as before, yet a new weight rest. So what's to be done with this? The roof will mute its thoughts, push away the sun, the rain, push the squirrels back into the trees, and the walls will do what they always do, crack without a sound, refusing the mumbling ground. Thank you all.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was lovely. I particularly liked come back. Was it come back will be the last words you hear? Yeah.
Come back is often the last words you'll hear.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last reader is Cherene Sherrard. Cherene is a poet, scholar, and essayist. She is the author of 2 full-length poetry collections, Vixen and Grimoire, both from Autumn House Press, and Mistress Reclining, an award-winning chapbook. She teaches at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and was a Walter E. Dakin Poetry Fellow at SWC in 2018. Welcome, Cherene.
Thanks, Leah, and thanks to everyone at SWC for hosting this reading for us. I'm really thrilled to be reading with Charlotte and Laura and Eduardo. I so enjoyed hearing all of you read. I have all of your books, so they're all hanging around here together. And yes, thanks very much. And Charlotte, I'm concerned that that poem Lightning might have actually conjured a storm. So I'm hoping that our internet connection will hold for the end of this. If not, I'll find some other solution. So I'm going to read some poems from Grimoire. Many of the poems here in the first section are a conversation with the author of the first known cookbook written by an African-American woman, a free woman of color named Melinda Russell, and she published her cookbook in 1866. And so several of the poems in this are recipes in conversation with her, at least in the first section of the book. And so you'll hear within the poems found lines from the recipes. The first one I'm going to read is Wild Yeast. What color is Shakespeare? To answer, I read my son Dunbar. First, we recite We Wear the Mask. Then, when Melindy sings, we pause at the line From the Kitchen to the Big Woods. When cooking with Melinda, her haintly breath is citrus and clove. Her hands, rough as wind within, smooth as pears without, guide me as I knead and read her receipts aloud. Each line works its alchemy, solidifies her shade, elevates the timbre of her voice. She does not speak the broken tongue of Paul's folksy muse. Penwomanship alone affirms her education. Not until the poet delivers Dinah's arms, buried elbow deep in dough, do I forgive his lyric blasphemy. And I should say some lines in there were also from the poet Paul Laurence Dunbar. So another recipe poem. This one's fun because I actually read it and I workshopped it and then read it at SWC. By workshop, I mean Charlotte and maybe Laura and I sitting on the porch around that adorable coffee shop near where we were staying. Things to do with ginger. 3 kinds of ginger blent in the bowl I stir while wearing a white evening gown. Standard wardrobe issue for Ginger Grant. All one needs on a desert island. Of all the castaways, she is the one whose body, stretched into sequins of spun sugar, I long to occupy. The way she exhales each syllable is the exact balance of heat and sweet that must align for gingerbread to be edible and not something the survivors of the SS Minnow wouldn't touch. The oven fans the air effervescent with copper dust. I can't take my eyes off the caramel, not even to tie an apron over my ivory taffeta, which is in fact my unworn wedding dress, now tight across the bodice, but still so loose in the tail of tulle that my son is lost in its folds. In my episode, Ginger marries the professor after pushing that insipid Marianne out to sea on a bamboo raft. I imagine sharks tearing at her manicured toes, drawn to the crimson polish that must have been her one personal item. Sponge cake soaked in coconut rum, spangled with shards of crystallized ginger, is perfect for tropical nuptials. Our fortunate couple can easily keep their vows in a space where the other single woman has been set adrift. So in the second part of Grimoire, I turn to issues around childbearing and childbirth, and in particular, the disparity in birth outcomes between white women and women of color. And I came to that understanding that that kind of making was also going to be part of the recipes, or would be in conversation with those recipes. And part of that is because grimoire, the title, comes from an archaic word for a magical textbook. And it's a word that was often used for books of alchemy and power, but also for recipes. And in many cases, the word receipt, which is an older spelling of recipe, could be a spell as well as a recipe. And there are ways in which I see this book as a form of survival guide. So I'll read the first poem from that second section, Outcome. Her serve is 125 miles an hour, but she cannot outrun this. She has won, has published, but she cannot outright this. She has starred, has danced, but she cannot outtwirl this. She has flown, sung, and swam, released from parallel bars, stuck a vault without stutter, but always the eclipse awaits. Anomaly, when a thing happens that the accumulated data cannot validate. You tell yourself this is not life-threatening. You tell yourself you can afford to raise or bluff. You tell yourself you can enunciate yourselves out. The talented 10th assembles a league of doulas. They edge the black of their capes with starlight. None of this helps. None of this will save you. Dixie moonlight, a flood like Noah's flood, like after Katrina, like the Mississippi's goddamn muddy blues, like Sylvia on death or Tony on slavery, like swag surfing over the breakwater, the levees levitating, water seeping up through cracked foundations like molasses, drowning cows in a pasture of sweet. This placental blood is an abrupt surprise. So let's see, I think I'm going to read a poem since in honor of the debate that we're not watching, I think I'm going to read a poem that was a response for me to how I felt after the election in 2016. It took me a long time though to write this poem, and especially to people who responded with tears and of disbelief, whereas I just felt very, unfortunately, resigned and kind of dry-eyed. Apologia. Today in the mail, I received a handwritten note from a person whose illegible signature required that I Google the address to discover its provenance. Let me restate, its provenance was benevolent privilege. So accustomed am I to the casual pokes and missteps of daily interaction that I failed to be offended by, or maybe misremembered, the incident obligingly related inside the card, imprinted with an abstract collage of what I think was an Asian carp, an invasive species my son likes to fish for in the lake and let suffocate on shore. He lures them with sweet corn, a kindness, he says, because these carp have no restraint. They obliterate biodiversity, and we do not want a lake that holds only one type of fish. Okay, I think I'm going to end with my Beyonce poem because I like to end on an up note and everyone has to have one. And also, the thunder is getting louder here. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can. So this poem is called Perfect Matte. And in some ways, it responds to a CoverGirl campaign ad that Beyonce was a part of, where she used all these different parts of her ethnic heritage, essentially to sell makeup. And I thought about, oh, how would that work in a poem? Perfect Matte. The unnamed African woman who took a halting step off a ship onto swampland in a Louisiana port had a certain je ne sais quoi. Call it survivor sparkle, a corona that attracted the highest bids in Congo Square and sent her straight to the big house. Beyonce, you and I wear the same shade of foundation, a tube of red minerals culled from Yoruba, Seminole, Irish, French, and Spanish earth, blended seamlessly into a creolized clan of American Negro. We share this common ancestress, but while she can be ridden in a golden flounce, I am too tired to twerk, to wield the flat iron, to swallow the lemonade, to cleanse the vessel, to host a goddess. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherene. That was terrific. I had no idea that Grimoire could also be a recipe book. That's really interesting. I didn't know about that conflation of recipe as cooking and as magic. That's fascinating. So I saw this thing at another virtual reading that I've been started asking people to do, which is if everyone could just unmute for 1 second and clap. If we make noise unmuted, then the screen should go around to us and it'll just be a moment of our wonderful readers actually getting to hear some applause. So I see all the Okay, thank you, everybody. And now Gwen Kirby will moderate Q&A.
Hello, everyone. Readers, thank you for that wonderful work. That was amazing. So I'm going to be moderating questions. For anyone who'd like to ask a question, you have two options. Feel free to go ahead and type your question into the Zoom chat, and I will read it to our wonderful readers. If you'd like to ask the question yourself, go ahead and just use the raise your hand feature, and then I'll call your name because I'll see that in the participants bar, and I will let you unmute and reveal yourself, and you can ask the question on your own. So yeah, please feel free, jump in. It takes everyone a moment to gather their thoughts.
I will ask one, Gwen, while other people think about it. I'm actually, just to follow up on what I was just saying, Cherene, I'm curious how you learned about the recipe book that inspired poems, and what made you decide to use that as a source material.
Well, I like baking, and I love and I'm sort of addicted to cooking blogs, especially right now. And so I was reading the work of a African-American culinary historian, and she has a book called The Jemima Code, which is like a compendium of Black cookbooks over the last 200 years. And the very first one was an excerpt from this cookbook by Mrs. Melinda Russell. And as far as I know, there's only one. It's in the archives at the University of Michigan. And I called them and they sent me a facsimile of the cookbook. And I just fell in love with just the audacity of this woman in the middle of the Civil War to think that she could publish a cookbook. And she was she's a chef. She had a pastry shop in Tennessee. And there's not a lot that we know about her. So I had to try and learn what I could from actually cooking through the recipes. So that's really was the genesis of the book. But then, whenever you have a project, I was like, how many recipes can I really come up with? And so it was actually over the time, in Sewanee that I began to see what the other part of the book was, especially the part that dealt with childbirth and also loss. There's a lot of poems here about what it means to also lose children as well.
We have a follow-up question to that in the chat, which is, do you have a favorite recipe from the book?
So these recipes are hard to make, and I am not like professional at all. And they're written like they're very sparse, so they're really difficult. You kind of need like, I don't know, Dory Greenspan or like Julia Child like skills to replicate them. But there is one actually for ginger cake that I felt like I was able to pull together. And so that's probably my favorite one, but I would say it's not authentic because I had to make a lot of changes. Like uses, I don't know, like a liter of molasses or something like that.
Well, this is a first. We have a question from one of the readers to her fellow readers. And she says, this is from Charlotte. I'm curious about what everyone learned with their newest book that they hadn't done or known with their others.
I like to ask the easy questions.
I noticed in the first book that I tended to end a poem with a lyrical flourish, something that I thought was kind of resonant. And I learned to maybe not do that so much in the second book. Right. I think I failed, but I tried my best.
Yeah, I don't know if this quite answers the question, but this book, I ended up taking a lot of poems out that had been in an original version of the manuscript and putting in more poems, making it more thematic in a way. And my first book was not so much that way. And it wasn't because being thematic in general seemed like a better thing to do, but just that the histories and stories and people I was dealing with, I was like, oh no, this all needs to be together in one piece. And these other poems, which I might like, aren't part of that piece, so they're gonna go out there. So that was a little different. Whereas in Watershed, I think I was working more poem by poem throughout the process.
I think in my first book, I was just desperate to get published. So that book was like, these are the best poems that I have written thus far. Please just put them together. Whereas with this one, I think I was much more conscious that it was a book. Like that was my sense that I felt like I was, I could see the poems coming together in that way.
Reading. Do you want to watch any of the debate?
Sure.
Jeff, if you want to put yourself on mute.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you missed the whole meeting.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to mute Jeff.
It's a slice of home.
All right. We have a question from Kristen Fogdahl for Laura. Which is, how did you approach the secret garden erasures? Did you use a single page, a chapter?
Thank you, Kristen, for the question and for coming. Each of the sections I read is from a single page, and they're kind of spread throughout the book. So the book, The Secret Garden. And I didn't, when I was doing them, I did use like marking out words in between the words I was keeping on the page, but I didn't try to preserve that perfectly. I'm really excited about a book coming out by another Sewanee alum, Jen Sperry Steinerth, where the erasures really look like she had them on the page. So you can't see the exact page, but I have like tried to preserve the spacing of kind of how the words appeared between what I blacked out there. And so each of the sections I read, like this was one page in The Secret Garden.
Thank you. That was great to see the visual of that. Eduardo, Leah would like to know what made you feel like you should move away from the lyrical flourish?
When I say lyrical flourish, I really mean an end, right? A pause, all right, to the lyrical energy, a pause to the narrative, a pause to the utterance, instead of having a question at the end, right? So the lyric space continues, right? Or repeating something previously said, so the poem ends on repetition, right? Paraphrasing, that kind of man. Rita Dove calls it, the last line should click like a box, like the lid of a box, clicking shut, right? I had that internalized for the longest time, and it's still in my mind, right? A lyric poem should click shut. The last line seals it together. And I was trying to push against that a bit in the first book, in the second book, I mean, right? That's why I end with some questions, I end with some abstractions, I end with repetition this time.
So you wanted to leave the box a little open, is that?
Yes, the box.
Huh, it's really interesting. Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that lately with the end of chapters. I think I've had the same sense that there was supposed to be a little click at the end of it, and I've been playing around with that too, trying to leave it open or not.
Yeah, and it's hard to break those patterns that you have been doing for a long time too. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ruth Hoberman asks Charlotte, I noticed you referred to DNA as a she. I wondered how she got her gender.
Yeah, hi Ruth. That's a great question. I actually was wanting to have DNA be this book since there is about 2-3 years research, and so I asked some geneticist. I was like, okay, I'm gonna put with this question. What pronoun should I give DNA? And at first they're like, what are you talking about? but then it was actually kind of everyone was agreeing, or the geneticists were agreeing that the DNA should be made she, because when the sperm and egg meet, the mother's DNA essentially eats the mitochondria of the sperm. And so they're saying that the female DNA has more material prevalence. And so she should be a she. And then in my book, I actually have it be first person plural. So DNA is always speaking the collective we. So that's the answer to that question, Ruth. Good question.
Yeah, great question. I love that answer, Charlotte. Thank you. We have another question for Eduardo, this one from Matthew Feinstein. And he says, Eduardo, this is a very technical and boring question, but this has been on my mind for weeks. What software did you use where you blurred words, emboldened words throughout the page? Did you just use Microsoft Word?
I didn't even have Microsoft Word on my Mac. I just used whatever was on Pages. I was that limited. Whatever was on Pages. And tell me, it's a limited tool set of tools. So I spent hours and hours from like 2 a.m. to 5, 6 a.m. just working it over, thinking about it. One of my tasks for the next book is to actually learn how to use maybe a software program that can maybe manipulate the language in a more adventurous way. So yes, it was me stuck at 3 a.m. with Pages on my Mac. It's a sad, sad narrative.
Thank you.